my framework is this is a long-term trend, right? We've got at least another decade in this, at least, probably two. Or the American dream that came out in the 50s was about the wonder of economic growth, technology, peacetime, and abundance and opportunity for everybody. Everybody could be the president, everybody could be rich. That mentality is terrifying because it creates a misalignment of present self and future self. So everybody feels like they never got there. This was the whole book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, was basically this, is that's what Vegas is about. We don't have gambling in the same way in Europe. You can go and gamble, it's just not a big deal. But in America it is, because it's about this future expectation of yourself, I think, driven by the American dream. And obviously a frontier style economy and how the US, gave birth to itself. So the American dream was set up and a whole construct was set around it. So what happens is if too many people come into the workforce at the same time, they compete with each other for wages. And if you look back and inflation adjust wages for the average median American or the average American, particularly the median American, over the last 45 years, it's not gone up at all. So there's been no productivity growth. The miracle never happened. But in the meantime, the price of assets went up. Why? Because there's a whole bunch of people at the same age who all want to buy a house at the same time, all want to buy into the stock market at the same time to stay for their retirement. They pushed up prices. So they got poorer because they didn't own it all. And so the more they tried to buy over time, the more it went up. And they got this massive gap. And that gap between their earnings and the costs of assets that you secure your future income in kept going up. So they borrowed money. And when you basically adjust by asset prices like house prices versus wages, the difference is the debt. And then the government started doing the same. So it was all driven by the baby boomers, but the baby boomers had a second shock and a third shock. Second shock came really in the mid-80s, which was computers. Computers started competing for jobs with people, slowly at first, and then faster. And then 1996, 1999, 2000, well, 1996, the World Trade Organization, WTO, agreed that what a great idea. Let's all trade without tariffs with each other. Free markets. Yeah, well, the free market actually meant that when China entered the global workforce, they would work for a fraction of what you and I would work for. And so that meant labor costs never went up. And the cost of goods got cheaper because China could produce them cheaply. So we just gorged on this stuff because there's cheap goods. We borrowed more money because we had this future expectation of ourselves being rich, the American dream, and we gorged on more money and we borrowed money to see if we can make money from asset prices. So this whole thing was driven by demographics, and that came out of World War II. So it was World War II that drove all of the mess we're in now, and that's the same globally. You should be looking at the moments of extreme weakness, the blood on the streets moment, to be buying more, not on leverage, but just putting your money into it. So if you'd have bought a house after the 2008 crisis, you'd have done very well. If you'd have bought it at the peak, you'll have done less well, right? So timing matters. And I looked at this to give you a specific example, just wrote a whole article about this, is I went back with a bit of honesty, thinking, I'm looking at my ETH price and I'm going, why didn't I sell it at 3,000? I should have just, I could have bought it back cheaper. And I know that that is a siren song that goes in your head, right? Mental torture. And I've been in this space since 2013. So I went back and looked at my entries and exits and what I did in the past. And what had happened if I just bought and hold? And what had happened if I bought and hold and added when it was this far oversold? It's very simple. So I figured out that if I'd So what I did is I bought in 2013, $200 per Bitcoin. It went up to
Whoa.
it went up to 1,000. Sorry, it went up to 1,000 in 6 weeks. I was like, oh my God. But I had a long-term thesis. I wrote the first kind of macro strategy paper about the valuation of Bitcoin. I thought this could be worth $1 million. And let's assume I'm an idiot by 90%. It's still worth 100 grand. So this is the best bet I've ever seen. So I held on, and then it fell 82%. And I'm like, wow. But I'd taken the bet and I put money in, was not levered, and I could afford to take the bet. So I just thought, I'm just going to forget about this and just see, because this is a longer term thing. And you don't normally make money that fast, and it doesn't normally fall this fast. So let's just see. And then I kind of forgot about it, 2014. And then 2015 starts going up again. And then by 2017, I'm now mentally scarred from an 82% drop, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I then see confusion in the market about either we're going to fork Bitcoin to 2 different chains. The price is 2,000. I'm now up tenfold. I'm a genius. My macro bet has paid off, sort of. I sell out. It goes up to 20,000 in 3 months later, and I don't mind. I don't mind because I've made 10 times my money. What I did was deviate from my thesis. My thesis was this was a 10-year bet. And I took the money off the table within 5. And then I went back, and then obviously I bought back in June, May, something like that, 2020, and had a good run and put more money into it than I had originally in my original bet. And I worked out that I had, as opposed to just holding my original bet, I used a theoretical number. So I think it was, if you put 10 grand into that first bet, it would have been worth 1.4 million.
Whoa.
By doing the right thing, buying reasonably low and selling reasonably high, and timing the market. That was a small fraction. It was, in fact, I think I made 20% of what I would have meant if I held on. And then I went back and looked at, okay, well, what did I actually do? Because I massively increased my position in June. I still underperformed by 5x. And then I went, okay, what happens if I'd done the right thing? What I should have done, which was my framework, which was you buy it when it's on sale, when there's blood in the streets. So I went back and looked at the bottoms of the bear markets, assumed I'm an idiot and I can't catch the bottom of the bear market and miss it by 30%. And just put the same amount in each time that I started with. That 1.4 million would have been 30.
Whoa.
Sorry, not 30, sorry, 3.
I was going to say, good Lord.
Had I rolled my profits in, had I just doubled down each time or whatever, the numbers go exponentially larger. And that really stopped me in my tracks. It's like, here's me doing the right thing, buying when it's in a bull market, selling when it's in a too strong a bull market, buying when it's down a bit. And I still didn't do as well as just holding it. And if I'd just added to it, I would have done well. And my framework is, this is a long-term trend, right? We've got at least another decade in this, at least, probably 2 or 3 decades. But this part of it is going to continue to do very well. Sure, Bitcoin over time, as it gets more users, more adopted, it won't go up as much each cycle, but there'll be plenty of others and plenty of opportunities. So what we should be doing is using this, thinking of the money you've put in as your retirement money and writing it off. And then just adding, if you've got money in a bear market. Now, the problem is most of us don't in a recession. But a friend of mine taught me very early on, he said, Raoul, there's a key thing I've learned is he who has cash in a recession is king. So that's that combination of income